It's time for a change, Megatron. It's time for action, not words. I am the leader of the future.
All hail Starscream!
I can't hear you!
All hail Starscream!
One more time!
All hail Starscream!
This is going to be juicy.
Shut your mouth, you worthless piece of junk! You're so lucky, I should melt you down. Oh, I'm so tempted.
It's time to transform. Welcome to Rohan's Corner.
Rohan!
Over the years, there have been thousands, possibly even tens of thousands of Transformers characters created by Hasbro. So much so that I'd be so bold as to say Hasbro probably don't even know how many characters they've created, let alone how many times they've reused one character's name in a different character's mentality later on in another series. It's become a bit of a trend where the reuse of characters' names or characters throughout different series has had an impact in different manners and in different ways. And not always are those characters the same sort of mentality or the same sort of persona that they were in their original incarnation from, say, Generation 1 to Armada, or maybe even the Unicron trilogies into the War for Cybertron trilogy. It's become the situation that actually, throughout history, Transformers have transformed themselves in terms of their character, but not just their character, also in terms of their alternate modes. And what I want to talk about here is a few weeks ago I did a review of MechFans Toys Wreck-Gar. And in my video review, I did some editing and I added some video clips of other forms of Wreck-Gar we've seen throughout the years, including Transformers Animated Wreck-Gar. And Transformers Animated Wreck-Gar was a different alternate form of Wreck-Gar. It was actually a very similar character to the Generation 1 character, but it had its own sort of spin on the character and also a completely different alt mode. He went from being some sort of Cybertronian / alien motorcycle to a rubbish truck, which was pretty cool. And it got me thinking, what other Transformers have there been through the ages who have gone from one alt mode to another alt mode, and why? And are there any that have been improved over that time, and are there any that have gone backwards? And the answer is there's loads, right? Absolutely loads. However, there are certain characters who are absolutely synonymous with their alt modes. If we think of the likes of Optimus Prime, for example, he's always been some form of truck. And the same goes for Starscream and the Seekers. Characters like Hound and Trailbreaker always have the same sort of alt modes, that Jeep or SUV type alt mode. The Dinobots are absolutely synonymous with their alt modes. The Constructicons, Warpath, the Citybots and the Titans, even Ravage. On the flip side, you've got the characters who have absolutely changed their alt modes completely. Characters like RC, who's flipped from being a car to being a motorcycle to being a car to being a motorcycle in various different forms of the franchise. Characters like Megatron, who have been a plethora of different alt modes for a multitude of different reasons. And sometimes these alt modes have been the necessity to change because of characters like Megatron having a gun alt mode. Shockwave is the same. Soundwave too, because, through the decades, tape devices have gone out of fashion and they're no longer things that children of today recognize. Of course, it hasn't always worked. If you look at Cybertron Soundwave's alt mode, that Cybertronian jet was cool, was kind of weird. And if you look at his alt mode in one of the movies when he turned into a satellite, okay, that was different, bit weird, but hey. And then there's other characters, the likes of Thrust. Thrust is a really interesting one because in Generation 1, he was one of the Seeker / Coneheads. He had a resurgence in Beast Machines as a Viacon drone leader who was a motorcycle. Absolutely different character, but same name, totally different alt mode. Actually turned out to be based on Waspinator's character. Later on we found that out in the series, spoiler alert. However, still it's interesting that he's gone from a jet to a motorcycle. He goes back to a jet again later in Armada, and yeah, continues to have various different forms and shapes. And a couple of Beast Wars shoutouts. It's kind of hard to do this with Beast Wars because obviously you've got very succinct beast shapes and forms that characters have had, and therefore they can't really go from being a truck to monkey, so to speak. But Silverbolt, for example, a jet in Generation 1, ends up being a flying character in Beast Wars. And Scorponok, who was obviously a scorpion in Generation 1, ends up being a scorpion in Beast Wars, and there's continuity there. So all of this got me thinking as to which Transformers have had improved alternate modes over the years. And I would think that Wreck-Gar for me as a rubbish truck actually makes a lot more sense than as a Cybertronian motorcycle or even an Earth-based motorcycle. I personally much prefer that alternate mode for him, and in fact I would like him to have that again in the future. I quite liked the fact that Thrust went from a jet to a sort of a jet turbo type motorcycle, although I would say that probably moving him back to a jet was the right thing to do. It was nice to have that spin-off for a while. I'd like to hear what your thoughts are. Which Transformers do you think have had improved alternate modes, and which ones do you think have become worse over time? I quite enjoy the fact that Soundwave has gone back to being a tape player because it's iconic, obviously. However, I can understand why Hasbro have tried to change him over the years. Moving forward, I'd like to see some form of new take on that with digital type of media players or alternate sound systems being utilised, as we've had in the past with things like Transformers Animated and so on and so forth with his character. That would be very cool. Anywho, for another week, I've been Rohan on Rohan's Corner. Thanks for joining me. Back to the studio.
Hey boys, we've been rumbled. Well, let's bounce.